Hello and welcome to Lit Illuminated. I am Rebecca Beardsall, and today we are talking about the Serviceberry, this small but mighty little book, Abundance and the Reciprocity in the Natural World by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And you may have heard her name before. She is the author of the much loved Braiding Sweetgrass. So today this Lit Illuminated is going to be slightly different than other posts, but I love when literature reaches out into our lives and connects the dots. And this is part of the message I've been talking about on this platform as well as Instagram, the way that books connect us, help us understand ourselves and the world around us. And the focus of this small but mighty book is gift economy versus capitalism. And is there a space and a place for them to coexist? And so I'm just going to read a quote to you from page 103. And this quote includes the word mosaic, which I'm going to get to later in this podcast. So just remember that note here. So the quote is, "I see the potential for a mosaic of economies emerging in the example of my neighbors. Yes, they have to pay the bills and are part of the market economy, but they are participating in a gift economy at the same time. With every product sold, they add something that cannot be commodified, and that is, therefore, even more valuable." So this idea of the gift economy is many things. It is this shared harvest of abundance of fruits and vegetables or plants, things that we're growing is the example that was just shared there. It is the free neighborhood libraries, lending libraries, food pantries. We have a little free, I guess, library of art here in where I live in Bellingham. And also mentioned here is that it's also, the sharing of knowledge on platforms like YouTube and TikTok as this way to create in like this open source of learning. When someone's like, I don't know how to do this. Well, I'm going to go Google it. I'm going to go figure it out. Someone somewhere has shared how to do X. Like an example of that, I remember we had a issue with our cooktop, and my husband just like, well, let's just Google it and see if we can fix it. And of course, there was some guy saying, hey, this happened when my wife was cleaning it overzealously. It got some like water in the space, and this is what you do. It's those kind of moments, right, that we are giving and taking in this space of sharing our knowledge, our resources, our ways of walking through the world. And so that is in some way gift economy. And that's what's talked about here in this book. And so I have one other quote that I want to read to you, and this is on page 72. And to just link the Serviceberry to all of this, because again, that is the title of the book. So trying to figure out how the Serviceberry relates to this gift economy. And so the quote is, "The Serviceberry show us another model, one based on reciprocity rather than accumulation, where wealth and security come from the quality of our relationships and not from the illusion of self-sufficiency." So, typically on these posts for me talking about a book, I'll take you through all the sections of the book, what's happening in the book, what insights, ways that themes are pulled throughout. But today I'm really going to veer off a little, but not totally, because it really is about how books connect us and how books help us understand ourselves and the world around us. So just taking us a little detour. And early on page 3, Kimmerer mentions that the Serviceberry is known as a calendar plant, so faithful to its seasonal weather patterns. And so this is page 3. I have just started reading this book, and I immediately write Iowa in the margins. And Iowa is a podcast that I listen to. It's Iowa, A Road to Peace. And early on when I started listening to it, there was an episode that, just pulled it out for me. I have listened to this episode multiple times, and it's episode 17, which I will also add the link to the show notes. But in this episode, they are talking about education and decolonization. And they're talking to Kiri. And it was just this beautiful podcast that talks about education and the way that we're currently in this space of it being broken. And in the podcast itself, Kiri is talking about how we are disconnected from the world around us, and that we used to use the things that we were seeing in nature to understand where we were in time, what this was, what this was meaning for us. And I think that really hit me, right? And this idea of, and when I saw in here the Serviceberry as a calendar plant, was this idea that it used to probably be very consistent. And as the climate has changed and as things have changed, it may have moved in its timeline, or when it actually, ripens and becomes available, could adjust. But we're not necessarily seeing that because we're not in that space. So that podcast, the Iowa podcast, was so impactful to me because it was something I was thinking about in education itself, and how our education system we currently have is broken. It's so much so that I reached out to Kiri after listening to the podcast. I think for the second time, I was like, I'm just going to email her. I'm going to be brave and do that. And so much so that, we had a conversation back and forth. We actually had some Zoom meetings. And the last time we were in Aotearoa, I made sure to, connect with her and go have a coffee and discuss education even more. So I'm really passionate about this topic. And so to get that early on in this book, on page 3, make that connection between Kiri and this idea of how these calendar plants and these calendar things are so important to us understanding the world around us, but that we are so disconnected from it in our education system that, the system is currently, really, I was just having a conversation this week with another friend about her daughter in school. And she mentioned, schools, so they have their KPIs and they need to meet them. And this is where, the student kind of gets lost in that space, and the things that you would normally see, just in wanting to do the best by the student, it just gets lost in, are they meeting their, key performance indicators? And this is where standardized testing comes in and things like that. So anyway, we are leaving out this kind of human experience of growing, problem solving, and critical thinking. It's outside the classroom. And this disconnects us in so many ways from the land and the world outside the classroom itself. And the Iowa, episode really connected to Kimmerer's talk of this calendar plant, the Serviceberry, and why this is important for us to continue to understand and recognize how the plants and animals are adjusting and changing in the world. And if we're not educating to read those signs, we're not understanding the world around us. We are missing key components in our current education system that removes us from being wise stewards of the land, but also being collaborators with the land. So my specific passion for education is not so much in the areas that Kiri's which is in early childhood. Mine is in the higher education space, and I've worked in higher education for 15 plus years, and I'm no longer working in that system. I'm doing my own thing in some ways, offering MFA-like courses, but are outside of the institution, because I really believe that the system's broken. It's toxic. It's no longer serving the greater good. I have these 3x5 cards that I read each night before I go to bed. They're affirmations, my mission statements. And one of them reads, break the colonial and patriarchal system of education. And this leads me to the second moment of delight in reading the Serviceberry. So this book is short. As I mentioned, it's, small but mighty. If you look at it, it's 105 pages. It's like, something that you could probably read in a sitting. And I thought it would be a really quick read for me, and I'd be getting on here and sharing it all with you. But I was taking it very slowly. It was like a slow process for me. There would be spaces where I'm like, I need to put this down now. I'm not absorbing what I need to absorb. And so I was finishing it today, and I found out why I was going through it slowly. So on each Sunday, I log into Soul33 and I listen to the Monday mantras. And I will also add a link to that in the show notes. And as I was wrapping up the reading of Serviceberries, I noticed that Kimmerer starts to use the term mosaic, which, if you remember, the first quote I read to you on page 103 used that term. And there was other times that she uses mosaic throughout. And as I was reading that, I immediately went, mosaic, like Gaia just talked about that in her Monday mantra discussion. And I'm like, okay, I'm seeing the connection there. I'm hearing you. You're reminding me so much, like Serviceberry pulled me into that Iowa education and decolonization conversation again. When Kimmerer starts to talk about mosaic, I was immediately connected to what Gaia had said. Now, to be fully honest, I was like, what was Gaia saying about the mosaic? I just remembered the connection, right? Read mosaic. Wait, she talked about mosaic in the Monday mantra. So I went back and listened to it again. And so she was talking in the space, Gaia was talking about the space, about the mosaic in relationship to masculine, feminine. And again, thinking back to my little thing that I read about breaking the colonial and patriarchal systems of education, specifically in higher education, I was like, this idea that we're moving into a space where the higher feminine's coming in, but it's not so much about one being over the other. And this is where, Gaia said that we are safe to work together as a whole rather than relying on one or the other. So basically masculine and feminine. And we're being asked to work as a whole, like the whole world collaboration is what she was saying, and that many hands make light work. And this was a little note that she kind of put in the mantra. And we've heard that colloquialism before, like many hands make light work. But her idea was like, it's light work, as in bigger, light, bringing light into the world. It's not about making the load less. It's about many hands make the light work. And that in her conversation on this was that the masculine and the feminine embracing all that, as we become individuals, and we are aspiring to move into that space. And then she continues and she says, you already know what you are, and it's about uncovering that by looking with this compounded vision at yourself, meaning observing your life through the mosaic. And I was just like, whoa, this is the connection of the two, right? Like the mosaic here that Kimmerer is talking about is how we can combine these ways that the world is to this way we want to see the world, and changing into that space. Education, being so stuck in that patriarchal space, and thinking about how can we bring the feminine to right that, to in some way balance it out. How can we like walk into the world in a new way? And so I was a little bit like mind blown in this space where the three things that I've really been thinking about or connecting with or working through in my life, all came together into this space. So not only is it, how am I working into this world and fulfilling my purpose and my mission, and how am I using my talents and gifts of coaching and teaching, moving into this space, wanting to push against the current systems that are out there that don't seem to be serving us, and wanting to see education in a new way. And I really feel like Serviceberry in some way opened up my eyes to some of that, in addition to pulling in things I learned and resonated with from the Iowa podcast, as well as from what Gaia just mentioned today in the Monday mantra on Soul33. So as a wrap up of all of this is that this is exactly what I've been talking about. I feel like every time I get on to these book kind of conversations, I go into the space of books are here to open up the world for us. It's and not open it up in a way that we've never imagined. In some ways it is, but really it's opening it up for us to see what's already been there, what we know of ourselves, that we're just, as Gaia said, uncovering it. And in some ways it's a reminder. It's a reminder about like what is happening in the world and how we're connected to each other and our space and purpose here, but not only just in an intellectual way, but in, thinking about Serviceberry here in the way that we are connected to the natural world as well. So, whoa, big moments for me with this small but mighty book. Again, it's 105 pages. It's really insightful. And I would love to hear, when you're reading this, if you get any nuggets of aha moments like I did with Iowa and the Serviceberry and education, as well as the balancing of masculine and feminine with the Mosaic. I would love to hear if you get different ahas or if the same thing kind of resonated with you. So please add that into the show notes. Thanks again for joining me today on Lit Illuminated. It is just a wonderful space for me to come in and share what I'm experiencing as I read books. And so I just really appreciate that you are joining me on this journey. So thanks again. Many blessings to you.